in these constituencies, where they source the materials, are certain designated shops, and after a certain period of procuring the materials, they go back and they get their cut. My thinking is that as an MP, you should be a people's representative. Possibly, we must think in the long run that yes, you've allowed the governor to be in charge of resources for the county. How do we make sure the money designated for various constituencies are protected without necessarily making the MP look like he's also an executive, quasi-executive, instead of him being a people's representative? Now, it is taking even some of the areas, MCAs are demanding their share of money. And I know in some counties there is a compromise where each and every MCA is allowed a certain amount of money. My take, and this is founded not on the immediate issues or the immediate emotions of members of parliament, is in the long run, let us ring-fence this money per constituency. And the projects must be discussed, not by the MP alone, but by a committee that is properly set up. Most of these committee members at the constituency level are people under almost the purview of the MP. Of the MPs. So the MP is the ultimate authority when it comes to any funding that is spent in certain constituencies.
And how largely is a member of parliament involved in the constitution of this board? Because we have the board that manages this particular funds, isn't it? Right? And who selects this board? What is the role of the MP in patronizing, or maybe being a patron? Patronizing is a bit...
Well, first of all, I really want to say that...
But we can begin with you. I think you can give us a template. You are the member of parliament.
I will. What I did when I was managing that particular issue, I allowed the people of Makuene in each ward to elect their representative. But the law is not very tight on that. Some people appoint, but that particular team, which is elected at the ward levels and the sub-locations, ends up having some names which are approved by the House. Now, when these names come to the House, there is very little debate on that particular one. And I really want to agree with the Supreme Court in one way. There is a principle of separation of powers. The Supreme Court wants that upheld unless the Constitution is amended. Now, if you have to amend the Constitution on the principle of separation of powers, then it means a referendum. But then you can still align CDF to the Constitution and remove the participation of a representative of the people, so that the role of the representative of the people remains oversight to make sure the funds work well. The only good thing with the practice of the CDF, which has made it very good, is that the people themselves take full control of CDF. And any member attempting to interfere with the CDF will easily be announced by the people, so that the people shame any member who tries to interfere with the CDF. Because if you are doing a classroom in the village, the cost of a classroom at the village is averagely 800,000. And if it goes along to the farthest corner of the country, it will not go beyond $1 million shillings to do a proper good classroom. Right, some places it costs up to 600.
I wanted to find, I should ask a very pointed question. How then do you find your place as a patron? Is it anchored in the law? How come we have the MPs as a patron of this? Where is it anchored in the law? It is anchored in the law.
I don't think it is anchored in the law as such. There is a little bit of cleaning up to be done.
That's what I'm asking.
And there's a board.
How do you find yourself as a patron? Who appoints you to be the patron? Where do you get these powers from?
You know, in the CDF Act, doesn't really call you a patron as such. But what the member of parliament does is, while exercising his oversight role, is to make sure that the committee which is in place at the constituency level balances the development to every corner. And it is largely a matter, unless a member of parliament really wants to interfere, it is largely run by the people themselves. It is run by the committees all the way to the national level. There is a board which really has to approve all the projects.
Who chairs this board?
This particular board is chaired by the National Government CDF Committee as a chair and a CEO. And they are the ones who approve every single budgeting of the whole of that.
You don't sit in this board?
The member of parliament does sit in the board. The member of parliament
yes.
approves that board on the floor of the House, approves the CEO, and also approves the committees. And where the committees are not properly budget balanced, they can be removed. And even if they can be debated and changes made to make sure that they are properly constituted. That's why they come to the floor of the House for approval, so that the member of parliament approves sitting in the House so that the board is properly constituted and the committees and the constituencies are properly constituted.
Thank you. Yes. Gladys, let's hear from you.
Yeah. I think you have to look at the historical context in relation to the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, the National Government Constituency Development Fund. Historically, what happened to members of parliament is that because Wananchi expects them to do some real work, apart from representing them in parliament and passing legislation and oversighting the executive, they still expect you to get involved in various projects that affect them directly on the ground. And many members of parliament will tell you they spend a lot of time in Harambees, fundraising to build a classroom, fundraising to build a police station, fundraising to build a road, and so on. And so there's a lot of difficulty. So what eventually happened was it was felt that for the member of parliament to feel some sense of presence on the ground and to help, and it actually goes with their political work. In its own wisdom, parliament decided that was the best way to go. If you remember, there was a time in history when our members of parliament used to troop to State House under the Moi regime to be given money so that they can go and do projects at home. But when the time of the Kibaki regime, parliament was freed from that by ensuring that they had the NCDF so that they could do this work. And you must remember there was the CDF Act of 2013. That is the one that was annulled by the court. And in that judgment at the High Court ordered Parliament to within 12 months regularize CDF by then passing a new law called the National Government Constituency Development Fund, adding NG. So that was regularized, and that story of CDF being illegal is now moot, except that there were other issues for determination that are still important for the growth of our jurisprudence that then went on all the way to the Supreme Court. When we talk about, so historically this is something that is necessary and it is important for members of parliament. Members of parliament, you cannot say let's not have CDF because members of parliament might interfere with it. That is why we have anti-corruption laws, ethics laws, checking mechanisms, and so on, to ensure that even if there was one who is badly behaved, they are not able to do it. For example, I know when CDF started, NCDF started, the buildings of schools were being done across the country using that fund or roads. And then it was found that there were discrepancies. In some places they were very expensive, in some places they were cheaper. What has now happened is there's almost policy guidelines on the cost per classroom in different areas. So that was resolved. And we must continue just to fine-tune the system as opposed to getting rid of NCDF. In fact, the beauty about it is that the member of parliament takes political responsibility. I know that I have probably visited the National Government Affirmative Action Fund offices in Eldoret twice or thrice in my entire term of 5 years. Why? I never have to. There is a board, there is a coordinator. They simply, the field officers would normally say these are the applications would be taken there and so on. And before I go and launch a program, I usually just tell them, send me a list of where the monies have been allocated. So they will tell me, this number of schools asked for water tanks. So they are getting, there's 200 water tanks being given to various schools, and they justify. Schools that have never had water tanks since inception, schools where children are carrying water to school every day, and all I check is that it's fairly distributed across the 30 wards. That's all. So because I know, should it go to only one ward, then I'm in trouble. I'll not be re-elected again. So in fact, the best checking mechanism is to let the MP be in charge of it, because even though you don't have the functional responsibility, believe me, you mess up NCDF, you're going home. Many people who are not re-elected either messed up the way they did, the CDF was badly run, and others have been re-elected because they ran it very well. Yeah, Daniel Manzo here probably came back as senator of Makueni because you ran your CDF well. Believe me, it costs them politically. And when you talk about you've mentioned that the president did allude to the fact that it is necessary to have a Senate oversight fund. And then you've said that, is he trying to dangle a carrot to the MPs? I can tell you categorically no. Why? This was something that had been raised in the last Parliament. This matter came before, in fact, the regulations were under the Public Finance Management Act were actually brought before the committee that I used to chair, the Delegated Legislation Committee, which Senator Daniel Manzo was also a member, you remember. Yes. And it came, the regulations came to establish that fund. It came to our committee. We nullified the regulations. And I know our colleagues in Senate were not very happy with us. But I told them, and I remember when I was moving the nullification motion, I said I am first a lawyer and an officer of the court before I am a parliamentarian. So I have clarity that I can never do something that my own colleagues and peers will say that is contrary to the law. The problem was that the Treasury mandarins wrote that law wrongly, and it was unconstitutional. It was unconstitutional and illegal. What we then, and I know if it comes up now, and I told my colleagues in Senate, I said, this time, take charge of the drafting. Right. Make sure you have the right person drafting the law, do it correctly, because yes, the senators deserve to have a Senate oversight fund. How are they going to oversight when they are unable?
So were they 2 times wrong? Because this is the second time this particular fund was being shut down.
Yeah,
so the drafting was a problem from the previous one and this one now that you've actually shut down.
No, there's not. The one hasn't come now. It was in the last Parliament.
No, but it's been shut down twice, isn't it? This will be the 3rd time.
I only remember, maybe it was in 2013, I don't know.
11th Parliament, yes.
The 11th Parliament, it was there.
The one
so was the question also still on drafting?
I was not privy to the one of the 11th Parliament. I was privy to the one of the 12th Parliament. And I know in that one, it was the manner in which the regulations were crafted and brought to the Committee for Delegated Legislation as published by the Treasury. And now, and we did sit and
thank you.
I told the senators, actually Parliament has one of the best legislative draftspersons in the country. And so if they just used the legal team in Parliament, they would have got it right, because it was so easy to pick out what was wrong with it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let's hear from Senator Maura, because you were seeking for this fund, you still... okay,
just allow me one more moment, and also just to further clarify, even when you are told that the fund can be used for various programs, actually they tell you this percentage goes to this type of program, this percentage can go to schools, this percentage can go to people with disabilities, this percentage, so there is rules and regulations. So it's not a blank check as the press tried to put it.
It's not one size fits all, it's been itemized.
Yes.
So you can tell us, you were there before and you were seeking this fund. People are saying you were given mileage allowances primarily. Your issue was, how then do you sort of make your way around the constituency, around the county itself, oversighting? Because people are saying, why should we give you this fund? You already have mileage allowance. We've given you also car grants, you know, so you're facilitated as it is right now. Why the funds?
Let me have offices, isn't it?
Let me first comment and say about the CDF. I mean, really, can we give can we give credence to CDF, because it is the one fund that you can see what it has done. Whether you can dispute the quality of the projects, but at least there is equity. At least 290 constituencies have to get something, whether it doesn't matter who's in power. But then I don't think there is anybody who gets elected to go and make laws in this country. Let's say the truth. When you go to look for votes on the ground, and I've been the other MP for 10 years in Rio, people don't tell you they are go and make laws for us. I don't think so. They want you to solve their problems. And the easiest way to solve problems is to have this kitty and provide for them bursaries. They will ask you to make roads. So our Kenyan MP is very different from the Westminster one. And that is the African, modification. And then the word is patron, so patronage. A king must be generous in the African setup. So if you don't have something to give, how will you be powerful? The surest way for members of parliament to be poor is not to have the CDF. Not because it makes them rich anyway, it's just that it actually offshoots these demands from the personal salary that is still very contested and politicized. So I think, in my humble submission, there's just a way that we need to come up with CDF. I was in Zambia in July. They have CDF. CDF was started here in Kenya and then Canada. It has been borrowed across Africa as a working model. It is the same principle that we have the affirmative action fund of the county women members of parliament, and now then coming to the Senate Oversight Fund. Now the politics of it, I was privileged to be in both houses. When I was part of the people who rejected the Oversight Fund for the Senate, and in the budget committee, in the budget committee, yes, in the 11th Parliament. But the whole idea is not that the Senate does not deserve money. In fact, it is very unfair, and Dan Manzo, now you are a senator, you see, the same privileges that accrue to a single-member constituency MP accrue to a woman rep and a senator, which I think for me is unfair. Because you have the same amount of money for running the office. It is equated to this single member. We are so much, we idolize a single member constituency that it is the yardstick to actually provide for a women rep, but more so also for a senator. So you cannot say that because people get mileage, then they can use that mileage to serve their constituents at the county level. Surely, I mean, that mileage is also for anybody who comes from Eldas or any other place. But then the politics is, the real politics against the Senate Oversight Fund is control, is power. And one member of parliament said, if you give a senator X amount of money just for oversight, something that is nebulous, then they can dedicate 300,000 shillings a month in my constituency and prop up somebody who then becomes the alternative MP. That is a real issue. So it's a power struggle. And we were called. They were called the State House, and then Duale was instructed that we should do it. That was the end of the story. And they were very confused. Well, there's nothing that came out of it. It was just a charade. So really, I don't know.
But now it's such a flimsy excuse.
No, it's power at the bar. But now there's an advantage, if I think so. The former leader minority of the Senate is now the Speaker of the National Assembly. He understands the Senate more. That's the only entry point. Senate will only be understood properly when you have former senators being where senators have not been represented.
But just hoist the war that we've had between, the National Assembly and the Senate.
But debate. I think the question that would be, and maybe that is where the conversation should move, does actually Senate deserve a Senate Oversight Fund? And my answer is yes. Why? How do you superintend over billions of shillings with nothing? Being a senator is one of the most difficult things because you just talk. That is why for me I had run for MP even if I did not succeed. So you cannot have a governor with a whole government of Mutula Kilonzo, who is a former senator, being oversighted by Dan Manzo here with nothing. So you have to have some money, and also further to it, to hire people who are going to go through the various reports, raise the issues. But let me finish by this. There's also discrimination there. because the nominated senators were only going to get only 6% of the 100% of what was going to be given. I was a representative in that small committee. We even went to the US for a tour to study how the US does it. If that continues, then it is a systemic discrimination. You cannot have something...
But it cannot be a systemic discrimination, because what are you oversighting yourself?
No, the whole nation. The whole nation. I mean, if you are looking at the 47 counties...
So you should actually get a premium about funding you as if you are oversighting the whole 47 counties.
Exactly. But then you should be
the Supreme Senator.
Yeah, because your function is national, and then you get 6%, you say about 20 people. I mean, really, that is actually one of the... That is very bad. That's our issue.
That is laughable. Let's hear from Arab Kira.
The bar.
Because, first of all, you know, I think Senator has been pushing for some funding, even from from the word go. When we had now the checking in of the Constitution, we saw Senate pushing for a constituency development fund, and I think they were seeking advisory from the Supreme Court on that as well, and that was struck down. Before now, we have this current Senate, oversight fund. It's still more or less the same, if you may ask. So they want some money. It seems they were looking for some money when they thought maybe Senate will be higher than the governors, and then they realize all the funding is good to the fund, to the governors. There's no kitty for the Senate as it is right now.
Well, let me start by saying the following. One, I had the opportunity of serving the people of Cherangany constituency for 4 terms.
Yes.
3 terms without CDF. 1 final term with CDF, and of course it was not as generous as it is today. I remember the first time money was given to my constituency, it was a flat rate of 6 million shillings to every constituency in Kenya. Then subsequently it went up to about 17 million. And by the time I left, it was 37 million. Today, on average, each constituency gets about above 120 million. Each constituency gets getting that. Now, my challenge is that at times we spend so much time on splitting hairs instead of looking at this money in a way that it will have more meaning to the people of this country. We know in various constituencies, of course, the natural attrition process of people to be elected or not to be elected goes beyond the money. It has so many other factors, including possibly people getting fatigued by your presence. By the time you're doing your 3rd term, 4th term, people get fatigued with you because they almost also want something fresh.
So it's not really the stellar performance of your...
It is not stellar performance in terms of the CDF thing. My worry, and this is my genuine worry, is that we are all looking for money. But is it that we want this money for personal use, or we want this money so that we look so powerful? My take would have been, we agree there is money coming to Trans Nzoia, for example, 7 billion shillings. Can a member of parliament have influence in making sure that this money goes to certain projects that will assist, but allow the implementation to another authority? It can even be ceded to the governor, and then that money is audited. You know, you may be saying here that, okay, there is the anti-corruption agencies. In fact, in terms of doing an audit of 290 constituencies, I don't think the auditor has enough time to do to every detail. We know in some areas, a check is written to a certain school, and some of the money is given back to the MP. Some of the beneficiaries of bursary, the processes are not as transparent as we are talking about here.
So they're working in cahoots also with some of the schools? Yeah.
Some of the schools, and even some of these committee members.
So just
because these committee members, who proposes them from the ground? It's the MP who knows these people. So at the end of the day, what you should be doing here is, what is the fundamental philosophy of ensuring that money gets to every corner of this country? My take is that we will influence this money, but the implementing authority must be identified, even if it's the office of the governor, so that the MP is truly a people's representative, but he still got influence to say, yes, this corner of my constituency suffers more than the other corner of the constituency. That, in my opinion, is a better way of looking at this money. I'm not suggesting whatsoever that this money should not go to the constituency. I'm saying for the 15 years before the CDF came, the money that came to my constituency would have been less than 10 million. I can say in the last 5 years of my tenure, we got about 100 million, which was an improvement compared to the 15 years that we did not have CDF. So CDF is important, but the way it is being utilized is yet to be improved. There's no proper accountability of CDF 100%.
So accountability is a big issue.
It's still a big issue.
Yes.
And whether the senators will get money, we must really understand. Are they going to get money also to do projects, or are they going to have some enhanced allowances for purposes of reaching every corner of the county?
Thank you.
That should be the question that we ought to engage in.
Well, since we have an issue also with accountability, then why would we seek to double this amount to 88 billion shillings? Isn't what you're getting right now sufficient enough? Why do we need 88 billion shillings on top of this? Because now we can see there is also economic empowerment fund that is being added into this. The rhyme and reason for this economic empowerment fund has not been well established. Why would we hype this amount to 88 billion shillings?
I would like to look at the historical perspective. And one of the good experiences was when CDF was nullified by the court, and for 1 year while another law was being made, the same functions were to be implemented through the Ministry of Education, especially for the schools, and for the chief's officers and security, it was to be the Ministry of Interior. And the experience was very frustrating. In fact, CDF is the only fund you can see on the ground, and the people can feel it, and it's a fair distribution of national cake to the people. I want to agree that there could be gaps which should be filled up. There are gaps of the law, but it was next to impossible. The fund was sent to Ministry of Education. It was next to impossible to get it on the ground, and they were very smart. They waited till it was near election, and they assisted a few MPs, and the rest of the money actually got lost there. You could never know where it went to, who it helped. So first of all, I want to say that CDF, national government CDF, is very, very important. But we need to come up a way of making sure it is aligned to the Constitution, it is aligned to the law, it is properly protected for the benefit of the people. Secondly, if you are a senator, the government somehow pays for a Senate office somewhere, it's paying rent somewhere. You need several other offices, and you need to monitor all the billions which have gone to the counties. They must be properly accountable. You need to go and look at the projects. You need somebody else to get there and to get to know the projects the counties are doing. So in one way or another, you have to facilitate for that. You have to have employees. You have to have an office. If you are operating from Nairobi, really, or you are renting some premises in certain sub-counties and some headquarters, then you need to put all that money together for an office, which is functional, so that you can be able to oversight the governor. If you are not facilitated for that, then it doesn't. Finally, when it comes to bursaries, we are now forced to conduct a rampage every other day to take children to school. Because now the CDF fund is mute for some time, and children need to go back to school. So I believe we need to come up with a system.
You've not answered my question. Why do you need to double this fund?
Well, I need to see the proposal, because it's only at a proposal stage.
Okay.
And if it is a proposal, it does not mean necessarily.
That's the real assessment. Do you think you need more funding?
Well, you need to be facilitated to be able to implement what you are elected for. My work is oversight of the county. I need proper facilitation to be able to get into the details of what is happening to the county assembly and what is happening to the governor.
Gladys, the economic stimulus and empowerment program, the Senate oversight funding, and the CDF right now. Why all these three? Why not one? Especially the economic stimulus and empowerment program. What is it for?
There are some which have, if you look at CDF, some of it is actually a service. For example, ensuring there's a police station, ensuring that the schools have classrooms and so on. So it's a different fund. When you look at the proposed Hustler Fund,
isn't it?
Police
station, isn't it the function of the national government on security issue?
But that is that's why it's called the National Government Constituency Development Fund, because it's actually spearheaded from the national government, except that the patronage and ensuring political responsibility that the work actually reaches the actual ground, it is the MP. So let's not confuse it there. And so I was differentiating that from the constituency development, from the proposed Hustler Fund. Again, the mechanics of exactly how the fund will work is yet to be published, and regulations brought to Parliament, because they will have to come to Parliament. So it's a bit premature to say that. But my own knowledge from having read the plan of the President is that it is for economic activity. It's supposed to spur economic growth. And there are many ways of spurring economic growth. One of them is affordable credit, and that has been targeted for exactly that. And so it's totally different. It's not for building a police station. It is to ensure that if there is a Mama Mboga who has been only able to buy 500 shillings worth of wares for the day to sell, she could do more, but then she doesn't have the resources. So she's able to borrow at a cheaper rate. This is for the Mambogas and the people who tell you that they borrow. If they borrow 1,000 shillings, if they borrow 5,000 shillings, they pay back 5,500, I think. And I think by the next day they'll have paid another 1,000 shillings. So eventually, all the money they've borrowed is actually going back to repay interest, which they're borrowing from Shylocks. But now we are saying you don't have to do that. We'll make sure that you're able to borrow the money. This has also been done in India, and it has worked extremely well. And also people are able to earn a livelihood. There's other ways, again, of stimulating economic growth, even at a lower level. These are making sure that you don't criminalize economic activity. If somebody is selling their wares on the street, rather than come and take their wares, confiscate it, make sure that they lose everything in one day, and then you go and hold them at the county cells for till a second day. I mean, you've completely crippled that person. Decriminalize it by making sure you get them a secure, safe, and good place to serve. And a good example actually is the Maasai market. Maybe you were too young to know, but there was a time in history where the Maasai market would be at corners of the streets, and sometimes the county council would come and take their wares. But look at the way it's organized now. It's in a different mall every day of the week. It's become a tourist attraction. Those are hawkers who have a decent place to work. So it's each of these activities are for separate issues. If you look at the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, we only target women groups, youth groups, and people with disabilities. So no group for women can have more than 30% men in it. It has to be purely for. So again, it targets that particular group of people. Again, it's for bursaries for very vulnerable children, and so on.
It was approved by court.
Yeah, and each of it is in fact the membership of the board is even legislated. It tells you must have one person representing people with disabilities, one person representing women, another person representing youth. Then it's quite.
It's the template, but
it's a template.
It seems that the person who also really is overshadowing it is still the MP.
No, but the thing is, I think as a country, if we begin saying we can't get into any programs because we are afraid so and so will put their finger in it, or we are afraid that somebody might steal it, then you're going to be crippled. You actually will never move. You'll stagnate. What you do is put in the check and balances available, the oversight of it to make sure that the right rules are being put in place. Believe me, it will work. Yeah, so rather than saying you won't do it, it's like saying, I'm not going to get on the road lest I have an accident.
Okay, so
you just have to make sure that the roads are safer. People follow the traffic rules so that all of us can be free to go to the road, not lock ourselves in our homes. So that's a very backward way of thinking.
But it all boils down to what Mheshimiwa is saying about political hygiene. Since
where we're coming
from,
put it well that it needs, he has acknowledged that this is a good thing, the fund is a good thing. Save for the fact that he's saying is that there are some places where it's open, open to abuse, which I agree with him completely, except that the fact that there are certain loopholes for abuse doesn't mean we don't have it. And he has said that himself also. All we are saying is let us continue. It is a process. Like I said, at the beginning, people built schools at whatever price they wanted at the beginning. But today, it is known that there is a unit cost per classroom, per running feet, isn't it? Yeah, so those have been set.
Yeah, okay. I just don't want to do a battle, but you know when lawyers talk, they can insinuate very dangerous, they can insinuate very dangerous statements, because at no time have I said CDF is not required, because you have said I have acknowledged. There's no time I said CDF should not be in place. What I've been maintaining is that we need to improve the management of CDF funds.
I concur with that. Yeah, I concur with that.
Okay, thank you. Let's have for Maura, we wind up on it. So this economic stimulus fund, if I make it clear, this is a hustler fund.
Not really, surely.
From what I've heard from Gladys is
it this one you're talking about? I thought you were talking about it in here, hustler fund, but the media write a lot of things.
Yeah. You see, the hustler fund is different. I mean,
so what is this economic stimulus fund?
No, I mean, like we have had an economic stimulus package before, which was actually released by President Uhuru when he was Minister of Finance before. I think what I think
it's two different things.
It's two different things.
So it's not hustler fund.
No, it's not hustler. Hustler fund is basically directly to the people. But these things are going to be clear, because I think, as we have been told before, when people have legislative proposals, they need to percolate properly to know what is being addressed where.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's rest it down.
But on the economic stimulus, now I've remembered that there was a period where there's an economic stimulus fund which was going, let's say, to the Kenya Tourism Development Authority to go to hotels. Others were going to manufacturing companies to get them to expand the economy by so they could hire more people and and so on.
And
but that was very it was different. That was a one-off, and it was even done.
So we're seeing as it is right now with this legislation.
It is important because you see, when you have things being done at the local level.
Yep.
Where are people buying the materials? Where are they getting the labor? Where are they getting so that kind of thing? Because of course,
but how dramatically different will it be from the Hustler Fund then?
No, Hustler Fund is about Moira and his small business getting affordable credit to expand his business. It's different from having an infrastructural project in a locality that, of course, is huge enough to the extent that it supplies, resources, that kind of thing. So me getting my own personal credit that is not affordable enough from the banks and the Shylocks is good, because then I know what I want to do with the money. But us having a community project that is funded by government to spur economic growth because of supply and demand issues. Thank
you. Mheshimiwa, wanted to add something?
I just wanted to concur with the Honorable Maura on the issue that in Kibaki 1, there was some money that was given to designated projects, like building a hospital in certain locality throughout the country, so that in the process of building that particular facility, the people of that area benefit from the presence of that money.
Yes.
Compared to the Hustler Fund, which I think is targeting small-scale business people who may be vulnerable at the bottom of the scale.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And even that time there were some projects like certain schools build colleges in certain areas to balance so that you don't have people going very far away from development, and to make sure that everybody gets it there. But you see, when you look at the headline today, hustlers miss out on routes that they build, and then you have seen the 50 billion which is supposed to be allocated. My proposal to this has been you need to come up with a structure which gets to the person at the grassroots. And they should not amount into giving free money. They should amount into changing the life of that particular individual in terms of credit. And the best way to do so is to organize these teams in SACCOs or cooperatives. Then that money will not be lost, and it can be accountable for, and it can then spur economic stimulation.
Thank you.
Actually, what you're suggesting is already in the plan, so you're right on the spot.
Okay, so we needed to just round up on it, and I needed to get a clarification, because aside with that, and I don't know if we touched on it last week as well, another amendment is the parliamentary pension amendment bill 2022 that seeks to actually also compensate legislators harking back to around 1984 to 2001. And in a country where we're talking about, the economy really contracting right now, we're looking for funds, is there any rhyme or reason why we should actually compensate these legislators since 1984, 2001? Why, and what is the reason behind this particular legislation? If you're privy to it.
I'm not.
You're not privy to it? Yes, but there's such a legislation that seeks to amend, yes?
Some have heard about
You've heard about it?
And it's been pushed by former members of parliament who served those days and feel that they were not served right in terms of when you leave work, or remember, like, if you don't do 2 terms, then you don't become pensionable. It's something to do with the pensioning of this particular workers, and it goes to workers' rights. It's been a proposal, but it not being a proposal does not mean, first of all, it will go through. And even if you have a law which has gone through the houses, finally the president has to assent to it, and a lot of times it is referred back, having consultations, so that the president is properly advised professionally, and also what happens in other countries. So we do not want someone to be discriminated, having been suffered so badly. There's no job which is suffering as a legislator's job. And then you end up with
you are the same lawyers here. You normally tell us that these laws are not applied retroactively. So even if you amend the law now, how will it apply retroactively? The law does not really work out.
I think that law may have a lot of challenges.
Yes.
One is it's good to premise on the fact that the current pension that we enjoy, those of us who are former members of parliament, came in the tail end of the 9th parliament, and it was premised also on the fact that you make a contribution. For the time I was a member of parliament, we were making a contribution of 50,000. That is my last pay slip for the last 5 years as a member of parliament. I was making 50,000, and the fund was making a contribution that cumulatively would give me what I'm taking home today. So some of those members may not have made a contribution in terms of that particular money. 2, the challenge is, where are they going to get their contribution? Today, if I went back to parliament, I can buy the period I was away up to a certain maximum, but you have to pay dearly. It's about 10 million per period of 5 years.
For it to be commensurate.
To be commensurate. So let's say if you lose 1 term and you qualify for pension and you go back, you can pay 10 million, or that's the figure. Then you get opportunity now to assume even the period you are away, that has been compensated. So that is a very huge figure, almost 200,000 per month for, let's say, 60 months. So that is the principle. Now, these members of parliament felt, and many of them, I'm sorry, many of them are in a state of disrepair. When you look at them, even they cannot afford simple medicine for the upkeep. So, and I think the wisdom was to give them some token, so that they also don't go home as if they never served in this country. But my worry is, where will you get the money for that particular, for those members? my take would have been for the government to be considerate. Those people are not many. You know, anybody who gets out of parliament, you are lucky to survive for 10, 20 years. Because there are so many problems. Many of them are ravaged by debts, by problems, by normal natural attrition process. So if you are to check those fellows, they may be less than 1,000 people or hanging around this town. Those who are members of parliament, not on the contributory scheme, but anybody who served after 2003 as some pension, if he qualifies, under a certain age, like Maura now doesn't qualify, he has to wait for 4 years before he gets his pension.
Yes.
And, yeah, because
You can get half of his pension, isn't it?
who no?
From what he has, you can get 50%.
No.
He has to wait
Now that he's out of parliament, he has to wait.
He has to wait until he's 45.
Until he's 45. But don't you think that law should also be tinkered, that if he wants to access his facility,
Yes.
his pension,
Yes.
he doesn't have to wait for that 45 years, because maybe right now he's out of parliament, he wants to use as a resource
Yes.
what he has. I mean, I know maybe in the private sector with the 50% of what you've really put as
But I know
pension,
he's going to get a job for the next 4 years.
his name has been floated. But if I may come to you, Gladys, I think we have a huge problem, even to what Mheshimiwa is alluding to, afterlife, as a parliamentarian. And I think even right now, when we're trying to constitute the Parliamentary Service Commission, this should be something that maybe we can take cognizance of. I don't know, in your leadership in the House, as in affairs after, the life, even just the mental health of its legislators.
There are two things. First of all, again, when you look at it historically, there was a time people would leave Parliament and go and live in abject poverty. They didn't have a proper saving scheme, pension scheme, and that has since been improved. But also it comes with ensuring that members also contribute and save up for their own. So the pension scheme is good because it forces you to save for your old age. If you look at the old concept that existed in the public service, NSSF, I think the contribution is 200 shillings. And by the time you serve for 30 years, you get 70,000. That's why we have very many, we know our families, our parents, they've worked all their lives, and now you have to support them. So again, it's not just it's not a problem that should be solved only for parliamentarians. I think it's something as a country. That's why you hear now, Parliament wants to change the laws relating to NSSF contributions, so that there is more contributions, so that everyone is able to live comfortably after being in employment for a certain period of time, to also ensure that even people who are in the informal sector are able to pay up into this social fund, to also protect them and cushion them, and when there will be a time when they are able to work again. And it's something that, in fact, as a country, we don't deal with it, then we will be having what we call old age poverty. And those are the most vulnerable members of society. It eats into the medical fund, it creates mental challenges and so on. But every profession, so if it's parliament, there's a different way of dealing with people who have come out of parliament. There will be challenges that you're no longer influential, nobody calls you, you're not powerful anymore. So that comes with its own challenges. If you look at doctors...
How do you prepare them for that particular
That's why the Parliamentary Service Commission, actually, they would normally have the HR wing would normally have programs for that kind of issue. And this isn't only in Parliament. If you look at, I was recently at a medical conference, a mental health conference, and there's a big problem of mental health challenges among doctors, of addiction to prescription drugs and things like that. And so now they're coming up with a program themselves under their association to try and see how they can help people in that profession. So it's just a way also we have to have programs to help our children who are unemployed and who are on the finished university, they are sitting in the shopping centers in the villages with nothing to do. Again, that comes with its own challenges. So this is across the board. Yes, yeah, but I think Parliament is better prepared now than it was many years ago.
Okay. All right. And you want to comment on that?
Yeah, there was a bill, Parliamentary Society of Kenya, that was built by Adam Keynan. I don't know where it went to. And there was a time even the former members of Parliament had been allocated 10 billion in the 11th Parliament. I don't know where that money went to as well.
There was money that was allocated?
Yeah, 10 billion. It was in the budget, I remember very well.
To go into a pension fund, isn't it?
Yeah, to compensate. And it was a one-off payment that would have helped these members. You see,
because I remember we had that conversation with Dan Keenan many years back, and I can't figure out if there was money dispersed then. We need accountability on where that money went.
Well, that needs to be followed because that bill was opposed a lot by members of Parliament. But I think they need to have a parliamentary society, because then when members of Parliament and non-members of Parliament, they hang around, a good number of them hang around Parliament, and they become they are seen as nuisance. But then if you have something that would keep them occupied, maybe they should be writing books and memoirs and things like those, being used for training of new members. There's a lot of work that can be used, and it was very elaborate because we discussed it up to the third reading. But I don't remember what exactly happened after that, because you see, sometimes when you're in Parliament yourself, many people don't think that they will actually become a member of Parliament. So you think it's for other people. I remember even trying to raise the issue of MPs, former MPs being given money, and I was really roasted in the public domain. I was debating on a Wednesday morning, and then I saw myself all over social media that I'm trying to ask the country to pay, because I had given a very good estimate of about 100 million every month for X number of people who are less than 1,000. And we need to look at it generally. And President Ruto has put it very clearly. You cannot be saving 200 shillings every month to get 72,000 or thereabout after 30 years, and then you have a pension scheme. Of course, if you look at our CFS bill, there is a huge chunk there for these retirement benefits and what have you. But if that were to be compensated by the savings, it would really help, because it becomes an investment, arm, for the country generally. Because all of this saved money must be invested so that it can become enough to be paid off as and when one becomes, due for that kind of money. But that is not happening. We are all relying on going back to the taxpayer to sustain the lives of those who are there. But if it was very elaborate and people can see this is Isaac Mora's contribution and this is the employer's contribution, it's across board, then it will not really look like some other undue benefit because of the high office that one person has held in the past. So it's about a saving culture, because honestly, to be sincere, and we've discussed this before with Honorable Kipito Kirwa here, and I think we discussed this a lot. There's very little that you get from Parliament salary. In fact, as we were discussing, I was asking myself, sincerely and honestly, if you are to lead an honest life, not doing business, relying on your salary, saving for your campaign, you will end up being poor. Because this issue of giving out money, even now when I'm no longer in Parliament, I still get requests, people asking me to help them this and that, because then you are supposed to be this person who helps people to solve problems. So I think there must be a way in which we help leaders, to do so. You'll be surprised by that to know that the pension scheme for the mainstream civil servants, senior civil servants, is very good. I think by the time you retire at the age of at the level of a director, you have an average of, and you are of age, you get about 150,000 shillings a month every for your retirement. That does not even accrue to a second-term member. So sometimes we are the poster boys and girls for pensions and privileges. But when you look a little bit deeper, you realize that this needs to be actually leveraged across, so that everybody is able to access a pension scheme that will sustain them. Like, look, all of us here will say, maybe we are taking care of aging parents, you see. They are dependent on us. In fact, that is the investment they make that we take care of them. But if you have such a system that it is actually self-perpetuating, upon attainment of this age, you are assured of this, and it becomes a saving culture kind of thing, it's safe for the whole country.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you look at some of the plans being planned by the government, is to push for, there's going to be many savings drives that will be done across the country to encourage persons, because it's always been assumed that those who save into the social fund, NSSF, are supposed to be only civil, it was for civil servants, but truly should be available to the hawker on the street and encourage them the benefits of saving.
Allow me to take a short break, and of course, talking about savings, when we circle back, I think we should also level gaze on that, looking at what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation. The pay cuts which are looming in Ruto budget plan. We are talking about the eye-popping 300 billion shillings as it stands right now. Where would we pare down, right, on this cost? No salary benefits such as allowances, including entertainment and travel, and various non-essential expenditures will be reviewed for the CHOP starting this morning as it